The sun dipped low over Willow Creek, a neighborhood built on carefully trimmed hedges and the suffocating weight of rules. The streets gleamed with perfection, lawns shaved to regulation height, shutters painted the same shade of beige, mailboxes lined up like obedient soldiers. But beneath that polished order was something else. Attention! An authority that wasn't written in the HOA bylaws but ruled with an iron grip nonetheless. Her name was Karen Whitmore. For as long as anyone could remember, Karen had been the self-appointed queen of Willow Creek's Homeowners Association. She patrolled the sidewalks with her clipboard like a sheriff in a lawless town, writing fines for the most trivial offenses: a garden gnome too whimsical, a driveway crack not sealed on time, a shade of blue on a front door that strayed one hue too far from the approved palette. And she loved it. That power. That control. That fear she could summon with a single letter folded neatly into an envelope stamped "Notice of Violation." But what Karen didn't know was that everything was about to change. Because after 10 years away, I was coming back. My name is Daniel Hartwell, and the land Karen had once tried to erase from this neighborhood's memory was mine now. My inheritance. My bloodline's last mark on Willow Creek. And the moment I set foot on it again, Karen's empire began to crumble. I hadn't seen Willow Creek in over a decade. Life had dragged me elsewhere, through small apartments, dead-end jobs, and the hollow routines of city living. But when my Uncle Henry passed, I was summoned back. He had left me his property, 2 acres on the edge of Willow Creek, where the neighborhood's manicured conformity gave way to wild grass and tall oaks. To me, that land wasn't just dirt and wood. It was memory. It was summers of fishing with Henry in the nearby creek, winters spent splitting firewood, and long evenings where the stars blazed against a black sky, unspoiled, unchained. As I pulled my dusty Ford F-150 onto Oak Hollow Drive, I noticed it immediately. The neighborhood hadn't changed much. The homes still looked surgically identical, the driveway spotless, and the air unnaturally quiet. Too quiet, like no one breathed until Karen said they could. I slowed near the corner house, and sure enough, there she was. Karen Whitmore. She stood on her porch like a general surveying her troops, blonde bob too perfect to be natural, oversized sunglasses hiding sharp eyes, and a floral blouse stretched a little too tightly across her frame. She clutched a leather binder like it contained the 10 Commandments. Her gaze snapped toward my truck, narrowing when she saw the out-of-state plates. By the time I pulled into my uncle's old gravel driveway, Karen was already marching across the street. "Excuse me," she called, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You can't park there." I stepped out, boots crunching against gravel. "Pretty sure I can. This is my driveway." Karen froze mid-stride, then tilted her sunglasses down just enough to look at me over the rim. Her lips pursed. "And who exactly are you?" I offered a tight smile. "Daniel Hartwell. Henry was my uncle." Recognition flickered across her face, followed quickly by irritation. She remembered. Everyone here remembered. My uncle had been the black sheep of Willow Creek, refusing to bow to the HOA's endless rules. He'd let his grass grow tall, painted his shutters forest green instead of beige, and built a shed without proper approval. To Karen, he was a personal affront. "Well," Karen said after a pause, her tone dripping with condescension, "I wasn't aware Henry had family." "Surprise," I said flatly. Her eyes swept over the property, the overgrown grass, the sagging fence, the weeds curling along the driveway. I could practically hear the violation notices being drafted in her head. "This place," she sniffed, "is in clear violation of at least 14 HOA regulations. Lawn height. Fence maintenance. Outbuildings in disrepair. As the acting chair of the Willow Creek HOA, I'll need to issue formal citations." I leaned against my truck and folded my arms. "Funny thing, Karen. I haven't even been here a day and you're already talking fines." "Rules are rules, Mr. Hartwell," she said, straightening her posture like she was on a stage. "We all have to live by them if we want to maintain property values. Surely you understand." I chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "I understand that you've been waiting years to get rid of this place. My uncle told me enough in his letters. You wanted his land annexed, turned into another row of cookie-cutter homes. Her nostrils flared. That land is a blight on this community. You'd do well to sell it to the association before it becomes a problem. I met her stare and didn't blink. Not happening. This land stays in my family. And I'm going to restore it my way, not yours. Karen's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought she might actually hiss. Instead, she snapped her binder shut and forced a tight smile. Very well, she said smoothly. But don't say I didn't warn you. Willow Creek does not take kindly to outsiders who refuse to cooperate. She turned on her heel and strode back across the street, her heels clicking like gunshots. I exhaled slowly, tension curling in my chest. It had begun. That night, I sat on the porch steps of my uncle's house, staring out at the oak trees whispering in the evening wind. The stars peeked through the gaps in the branches, just like they had when I was a boy. This place was mine now. And no clipboard-wielding tyrant was going to take it away. But even then, deep down, I knew Karen wasn't done. She had ruled Willow Creek for too long to back off easily. And I wasn't just another resident. I was the ghost of the one man who had ever stood against her. The war for Willow Creek had just begun. The next morning, the war drums started beating. I woke to the sound of papers slapping against my front door. When I stepped outside, the crisp dawn air carried the scent of dew and a stack of envelopes taped in a neat row to the wood. Each stamped with bold black letters, Notice of Violation. I tore one open. Grass height exceeds HOA regulation by 2.5 inches. Immediate compliance required. Fine, $250. The second, unapproved fencing materials. Fine, $500. The third, outbuilding erected without permit. Fine, $750. By the time I reached the 10th, I was laughing. A bitter, sharp laugh that echoed across the empty street. She hadn't even given me 24 hours before declaring war. As if on cue, a voice drifted across the road. Good morning, Mr. Hartwell. I see you've received our notices. Karen stood at the edge of her immaculate lawn, clutching her coffee mug like a trophy. Her sunglasses glinted in the early sun, hiding the satisfaction in her eyes, but her smirk gave her away. You serious with all this? I asked, waving the stack. Deadly serious, she said sweetly. Our bylaws are clear. Perhaps city living has made you careless. But here in Willow Creek, we uphold standards. Standards, I muttered. Or control. Karen's smile tightened, but she didn't flinch. I'll give you 30 days to comply. After that, further action will be taken. Perhaps foreclosure proceedings. You wouldn't want to lose your inheritance, would you? Her voice was silk, but her words were daggers. I crumpled one of the notices in my fist and took a step closer. You think you can scare me off with paperwork, Karen? My uncle may have bent under your games, but I'm not him. Her smirk faltered for just a heartbeat, then returned. We'll see. For the next week, it was open warfare. Karen sent letters daily. Petty, absurd fines. Threats of liens. Notices demanding I repaint the house, reseal the driveway, remove the shed. And she wasn't working alone. The neighbors, once friendly faces during my childhood summers, now watched me with suspicion. Curtains twitched whenever I walked by. Conversations hushed when I stepped into earshot. Karen had rallied them. Turned me into the villain. One afternoon, as I hammered nails into the porch railing, a man in a polo shirt walked up. He introduced himself as Mark Reynolds, another board member. He seemed nervous, eyes darting between me and Karen's house. Look, he said quietly, I don't want trouble. But Karen, she runs this place. You're poking a hornet's nest. Then maybe it's time someone smoked it out, I said, driving another nail. Mark sighed. She's got the bylaws. She's got the votes. Nobody stands up to her. Not really. Maybe they're just waiting for someone to show them how, I said, meeting his eyes. Mark hesitated, then gave the smallest of nods before walking off. It was a crack in her armor. Small, but there. The climax of that week came at the HOA meeting. Karen had plastered the neighborhood with flyers, special session concerning the Hartwell property. It was clear what her agenda was. I walked into the clubhouse that evening, the air thick with whispers. Rows of folding chairs faced a long table where Karen and her board sat. She rapped her gavel sharply. "This meeting will come to order," she declared. Her eyes locked on me as I took a seat in the back. "We are here to discuss the egregious violations at the Hartwell property. Mr. Hartwell has shown blatant disregard for our community's rules, and it threatens to lower property values for all of us." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Karen continued, her voice rising with righteous fervor. "If he refuses to comply, I motion we move to foreclose on the property and absorb it into the association." Gasps. A few cheers. I stood. "You can't do that." Karen's smile was venom. "Watch me." I strode to the front, my voice carrying across the room. "Let's get something straight. This land belonged to my family before Willow Creek was ever built. Before these bylaws. Before your color charts and lawn measurements. You want to strip it away because it doesn't fit your perfect little picture." Karen banged the gavel. "Out of order." "No," I said, slamming my hand on the table. The room went silent. "What's out of order is you. You've ruled this place like a dictator, hiding behind rules you twist to suit yourself. My uncle told me all about it. The fines. The harassment. The intimidation." I looked out at the neighbors. "How many of you have gotten letters for leaving your trash can out too long? Or parking in your own driveway? How many of you live in fear of her showing up with that clipboard?" The silence was deafening. People shifted uncomfortably. Eyes dropped. A few nodded. Karen's face turned crimson. "This is slander." "It's truth," I said coldly. Then I dropped the bomb. "I've done my homework, Karen. My uncle left me more than land. He left me his seat on this HOA board. According to the bylaws, as his heir, I inherit his membership and his voting rights." The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, shock. Karen's gavel clattered against the wood. "That's impossible," she shrieked. "Check your own rules," I said, tossing a copy of the bylaws onto the table. Page 47, Section 3. In the event of a property owner's death, their membership transfers to their legal heir unless the property is sold. The property isn't sold. I'm the heir. Which means. I leaned in close enough that only she could hear me. "I'm not your victim. I'm your equal." Her face drained of color. And for the first time, I saw fear flicker in Karen Whitmore's eyes. That night, as I walked home under the street lamps, I knew the war wasn't over. But the battlefield had shifted. Karen had lost her monopoly on power. And I had just declared myself her worst nightmare. Karen didn't waste time. By the following morning, she'd launched a counterattack. Flyers appeared on doorsteps: "Protect Willow Creek from outsiders, vote to remove Hartwell from the HOA board." She painted me as a squatter, a threat, a destabilizer of everything this community stood for. Her loyalists whispered when I passed. Cars slowed near my driveway, their drivers shaking their heads. It felt like the whole neighborhood was holding its breath, waiting to see who would blink first. But I wasn't blinking. For every flyer she spread, I knocked on a door. For every rumor she twisted, I answered with truth. I spoke to neighbors she had silenced for years, people like Linda Collins, fined $200 for planting sunflowers because they clashed with community aesthetics. Or James Rivera, who nearly lost his home when Karen hit him with stacked fines over his pickup truck parked on the street. I listened. I remembered. And little by little, they began to stand straighter when they saw me. The tide was turning. 2 weeks later, the showdown arrived, the annual HOA election. The community clubhouse was packed tighter than I'd ever seen. Folding chairs lined the walls, neighbors stood shoulder to shoulder, and the air buzzed with anticipation. At the head table sat Karen, gavel in hand, posture stiff with determination. "This meeting will come to order," she declared, her voice trembling only slightly. "Tonight we will elect the board for the coming year. I nominate myself as chair." Predictable. A few loyal hands shot up. But then Mark Reynolds, the man who had warned me weeks earlier, rose from his seat. "I nominate Daniel Hartwell," he said firmly. The room stirred like a wind had blown through it. Karen's head snapped toward him, eyes blazing. "Out of order." "No," Mark countered, holding up the bylaws. "It's perfectly in order. Any board member may be nominated. And Hartwell is a member." All eyes turned to me. I stood slowly, scanning the faces, tired, weary, but hopeful. "I didn't come here to run anyone's life," I said. "But I've seen what happens when power goes unchecked. My uncle lived it. Many of you lived it. If you're tired of being ruled instead of represented, you know what to do." Karen slammed the gavel. "Enough. This is a smear campaign orchestrated by..." Her voice cracked as she saw hands raising. "Not for her. For me." One by one, arms lifted. Some hesitant, some bold, but they kept rising until it was undeniable. The vote was tallied. And Karen Whitmore lost. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. Karen sat frozen, her knuckles white around the gavel. Her empire had just crumbled before her eyes. For the first time, she wasn't in control. This is fraud," she stammered. "You don't know what you've done. Without me, this community will fall apart. Property values will plummet. Chaos will." "Order," I interrupted softly, taking the gavel from her trembling hand. "True order, Karen, isn't built on fear. It's built on respect. Something you forgot a long time ago." Her eyes glistened with rage or maybe desperation. Then, without another word, she gathered her binder and stormed out. The door slammed behind her, echoing like the final note of a song. And just like that, the reign of Karen Whitmore was over. The weeks that followed felt different. Neighbors lingered on sidewalks again. Laughter returned to porches. Gardens bloomed without fear of citation. We rewrote bylaws that had been weaponized, replacing them with rules that made sense, rules that actually served people instead of strangling them. Mark Reynolds joined me on the board. Linda planted her sunflowers in full view of the street, and James parked his pickup with pride. Little by little, Willow Creek started to feel less like a prison and more like a community. One evening, as I stood on my uncle's porch, watching the sunset burn orange over the oaks, Mark walked over. "You did it," he said. "Never thought I'd see the day." I shook my head. "We did it. This place just needed someone to remind them they had a choice." He chuckled. "And Karen?" I glanced down the street. Her house was dark, blinds drawn tight. Rumor had it she was moving, couldn't stand the humiliation. For once, her silence was a blessing. "Karen's story is over," I said. "Ours is just beginning." Later that night, I sat alone with a glass of whiskey, the gavel resting on the table beside me. I thought of my Uncle Henry, stubborn, defiant Henry, who had fought this battle in his own quiet way. I raised the glass toward the ceiling. "We won, old man. Your land's safe. And your fight wasn't for nothing." The stars blinked through the window, steady and eternal. For the first time in years, Willow Creek felt like home again. And for the first time in her life, Karen Whitmore wasn't the boss. I was.